The Leafs pick up a win for the new guys as Giordano and Blackwell make their debuts. We'll look at that and more on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily fix for all things Leafs. I'm your host, David Morassutti from Sportsnet, and joining me with my co-host, enjoying his time in Kitchener, picking up the W in the top prospects game. So with Mike out, Austin Owens is back after making a brief appearance last week, and we get a Leafs win to talk about today. But before we do, just a quick reminder that Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, and make sure you catch us on YouTube. We're about halfway to our goal of 500 before we do our first giveaway. So if you haven't gone and subscribed to the podcast on YouTube, please go ahead and do so. Of course, today's podcast is all about the W against the New Jersey Devils as Petr Mrazek gets himself back on track a little bit here, picking up the W for the first time in quite a long time. And of course, we are going to discuss Mark Giordano and Colin Blackwell making their Leafs debut, not in the blue and white, but in the black and blue. We'll kind of discuss that as well, giving away our 3 stars, and also talk a bit about the Atlantic Division race, which is getting a little interesting. If you looked at the standings lately, you might be a little surprised at where things are shaking up. But first, Austin, I think we got to talk about the fact that the Leafs won, and not just won a game. They won a game in a way that we haven't really seen them do it. When Eric Schalgren was in net, they were winning these one-goal games. But with Petr Mrazek, they have not won a game like this in a really long time. And I think I don't think it dispels any of the concerns that Leafs Nation has with Petr Mrazek. At least for a night, we're not talking about Petr Mrazek being the, grenade option in net right now.
Yeah, last time I was on, I know we were talking about Mrazek having a rough go of it. And, I mean, when was the last time we were really talking about, with the exception of Schalgren's shutout and his good little stretch of play the last week, when was the last time we were talking about a Leafs goalie giving up under 3 goals in a game? It's not very often as of late. So, it's good to see that Petr Mrazek had a good bounce back. He's obviously been through a lot the last week, sitting on the bench watching Schalgren play really well, then on waivers, then sort of wondering. I don't think it was very likely, but he could have been claimed off waivers if something had gone wrong with another team. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, I would assume, for him the last week. So it's nice to see him get back in the win column. Some nice pads as well. It's always fun to see his little pads, his nuances. He's got one for every jersey.
Yeah, the black pads was a pretty decent look. I know that there's still a debate about going with the black over the blue and white.
Yeah.
I thought for the night it wasn't too bad. I don't know if I could if I could have a jersey like that for a full season, but for a special occasion like this, I thought it was quite nice. It'll be nice to see what Mark Giordano will look like with the blue and white
in a regular jersey. Yeah.
In a regular jersey, which will come Saturday against Montreal Canadiens, but that's going to be on the road, so he'll be in white and blue dominant. Although sometimes Montreal tends to go white for home games. It's all kind of random. But yeah, I think the fact that, Mrazek, especially early on, like the Leafs didn't allow many shots in the first 2 periods. It was kind of the game didn't really pick up until the second period where New Jersey got off kind of a weird goal where that definitely was not a shot. That was Severson looking for the backdoor tap in. I don't know who was down low on the play, but Ilya Bushkin recognizes it, tries to block it, and goes through him and then into the net on Mrazek. And then the only goal I had a problem with, and it wasn't really a problem with Mrazek, it was the second goal of the game where, I'm sorry, you got to clear out better in front of the net there, not allow New Jersey to get a few whacks on it, and he sure ends up putting it in. But other than that, I mean, there wasn't really much to complain about with Mrazek, which is good for a change. And I think a shout out to the shorthanded units tonight, where you get 2 shorthanded goals. Of course, Mitch Marner steps up again in a next gen game, like he's done many times in the past. It's like become a thing for him.
Yep.
This is the game he was born to be in. We might not get playoff success in Toronto, but we get one thing: Mitch Marner showing up in a next gen game. That's the closest thing we'll get at this rate. But I mean, just a rocket shot. I mean, you don't expect that from Mitch Marner very often. Maybe that's why Nico Dawes got a little that kind of caught him off guard. He's like, he can shoot like that?
Yeah, that guy's doing that. Are you kidding me right now? You already got to deal with Matthews, and then you got to deal with Marner shooting piss missiles from up top. It's ridiculous. That was a great shot. I mean, I don't want to go too deep into Mitch Marner's shooting technique because there hasn't really been much to talk about the last couple seasons. He's obviously an assist guy, but yeah, that's a hell of a shot. I mean, we were talking about it off air, Dave. Like, this is going to be a 30-goal season for Mitch Marner, and like he's deserved every minute of it. It's not undeserved, any of these goals. He's going to the areas he needs to go to. He's getting those shots to fall that I don't remember him taking one-timers ever before in his career. Like, he and Nylander aren't really guys that do that. They like to corral the puck and then let it go on a snapshot. Good for him, honestly, because, you know, the big talk with Mitch Marner is obviously his contract, and the big thing against him is, you know, he's not a goal guy. Why would you give a guy that just passes the puck over $10 million a year? Now he's proving to you that he can bring that other end of his game and score as well as passes, being one of the most elite playmakers in the league.
And that was an important goal for Mitch too, because I was watching during the intermission. You might have missed it, but Jamal Mayers was kind of breaking down kind of the tale of 2 plays where Mitch Marner on the penalty kill. He has a chance to. I know Jamal Mayers. I mean, like this week, I know he was with Trade Deadline with Sports, and I guess they're trying him out there, but. Mentioned
what's Nicholas Hagman up nowadays?
Oh my god, yeah, that's not.
So where are they now from the Dion Phaneuf trade?
Nicholas Hagman, man, oh my goodness, that brings me back. Not in a good way either. Jeez,
no, the worst possible way.
The worst possible way. Yeah, and like Jamal Mayers kind of brought up a good point in that, you know, Marner had a chance to get the puck out of the zone on the penalty kill. He kind of whiffed on it, and that led to the goal. But as good players generally do, they get their next opportunity to put in the net. They're putting it in the net. I think that was the important thing for the Leafs tonight. Is this was a weird game. It was a tight game. New Jersey was clearly trying to get them to bite and be super aggressive, and they could try those counter plays. And good on the Leafs for responding when it looked like a weird goal went in. It looked like New Jersey was getting momentum, and now they kept right to it the entire time. And I think it's a good win after what happened against Nashville, where they didn't exactly look great on the defensive side of on the defensive end. And, you know, you got 2 new guys in the lineup. You want to make sure that they are comfortable as well. And for all in all, from what I'm seeing in the post-game comments, Mark Giordano didn't have many bad things to say. So we'll kind of dive into a little bit of that and more. I also want to get the 3 stars of the game, of course. Before we do, let's hear from one of our sponsors, and that is BetOnline.net. Of course, we're right in the middle of the college basketball's tournament, March Madness right now. So from all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the number 1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And obviously, if you bet on the Leafs win tonight, did well on that one. If you bet the over, likely did not do so on that one. I would not blame you if you put if you try to bet the over in this game, because I mean Petr Mrazek has had a tendency to allow more than 5 goals in a game in the last.
I mean, if somebody decided to go out on a limb and take the over on shorthanded goals, they're winning right now. So I
believe the odds for this one was actually, it might have been 6.5. So I think you would not. So 3-2 win, you wouldn't have gotten that. So unfortunately, not. These are always tough games to also do. First game after the trade deadline. Leafs have had a few days off as well, bringing in new guys. It's always a weird one. I found it quite interesting though. Mark Giordano was talking after the game about his, getting into the lineup and how he felt coming into this game. Uh, he had some pretty decent things to say about one Timothy Liljegren. This coming from David Alter in his post game story. For a young guy, he's got super poise with the puck. He makes really good decisions out there. You don't really get a sense of how complete his game is on TV. I was really impressed with his positioning and all the little plays he made. Hopefully, we build. If we stay together, we keep building and go from there. Obviously, everybody, when the trade was made, had this idea of Giordano and Brody reuniting. Then the Rasmus Sandin injury happened, and you're just like, yeah, we're going to have to kind of put a bit of a delay on that because we actually need Mark Giordano to play on the left side and TJ Brody to play on his left side.
Yeah.
Do you think – I know Sheldon Keefe will likely move Mark Giordano into tougher assignments. That's usually what he does. He likes to tinker a lot. But do you think this is the best thing right now for Timothy Liljegren to have a veteran like this and to continue to move forward and make this kind of an important adjustment for him?
Yeah, I think this pairing is huge for Timothy Liljegren because up till now, I mean, no offense to the guys he's been playing with, but they're not Mark Giordano, obviously. It's a guy that is, 2-3 seasons removed from winning the Norris Trophy. Like, you can't discount the impact he brings on either side of the puck, but most importantly, the defensive end. So for a guy like Liljegren, I know the last time I was on, I believe we were talking about him being more of that offensive-minded guy, more of, a Morgan Riley type where he thrives in the ozone, but he's not going to, win a Norris, not save that for later in case he does down the road. But he's not going to go out and be your shutdown guy. So, we saw what happened when the Leafs first brought in TJ Brody last year with Morgan Riley. And Morgan Riley was able to go up, make some of those mistakes, but he knew that he would have that guy back in order to cover for him if he did. And I think that's a big thing for Liljegren is he's not going to take risks with the puck. Obviously, he's just trying to stay in the lineup at this point. But, that confidence, I think, that you have in your D partner that, hey, if I screw up or if I try and jump up in the rush here, that I have this guy back here that's going to be a rock for my team. I think that's a big confidence boost for him. So I'm excited to see if that pair sticks around. Like you said, Sheldon Keefe is going to, move some things around, but he's a hell of a player. I think Timothy Liljegren, if you look at I don't want to go too deep into him. I feel like I'm rambling a lot. I try not to do that, so I apologize. But he hasn't really had a full season in pro hockey. He's been out of the lineup with the Leafs. He had half seasons in his first 3 years with the Marlies because of injury. Like, you're starting to see him be getting consistent minutes now, and he's starting to develop into the player we kind of considered when they took him 17th overall. I believe it was 2017. So I'm really excited to see if they keep that pair together. What Timothy Liljegren can do with a good, solid just a solid rock back there in Giordano.
Yeah, and you got the sense too that when you look at, even if you look at the stats, I'm just taking a look at natural static right now. Yeah. They weren't overly, there weren't a lot of moments where you felt like they were outmatched in any way, really. They're not getting the heavy minutes that, let's say, like a Morgan Riley or even a TJ Brody, Justin Hall would get. But the important thing is, one, they were not on the ice for goal against. That's crucial there. And you want to see you're trying to build that instant chemistry. And for a young guy like Timothy Liljegren, I don't think he's ever played with anyone of the caliber or veteran presence of a Mark Giordano. So I think it was important for him to get something different because he's played a lot with Rasmus Sandin. He's played with Jake Muzzin. Maybe Jake Muzzin is the closest thing, but we're also talking about a Jake Muzzin that hasn't been the same Jake Muzzin all year long. And even Jake Muzzin has said, like, I need to be better for my young defensive partner. So I think that's going to be a very crucial thing for the Leafs. And to know that they can go 3 pairs deep, like 3 different pairs you can throw out of the boards and feel comfortable having on the ice. Not often you can say that with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, when they're at full health, I think you're looking at some combo of maybe Morgan Riley's out on the first pair, then you have Giordano on the second pair, and then maybe you have Muzzin on the third. It depends on how, Sheldon Keefe sort of sees that mix going forward. But you look at that, and the Leafs have never had depth like that before. And maybe it's, Giordano eventually ends up with Morgan Riley on the first pair, and maybe TJ Brody drops down. I think the perfect thing in this situation, Hull and Muzzin, for as much flack as they've taken, I take them in a heartbeat as the third pairing. If they're your third pairing, you're doing something right. So I think if Liljegren and Sandin can find their footing with Giordano, then them being on the third pair and not having to rely as heavy on Jake Muzzin, especially with his injury history, you don't want him to be logging heavy minutes and hard checking in the playoffs because there's a chance he could get injured again. I mean, that's a great problem to have if you're Sheldon Keefe having to, scratch one of Timothy Liljegren, Rasmus Sandin. Lyubushkin seems like he's in there for good, and that's good. He can log those minutes. So I'm excited. I think this is the deepest the Leafs have been on defense in this era. All due respect to, the Ron Hainsey's and the Matt Hunwicks of the world. But
yeah, and I think you're going to see some tinkering there. You wonder where Ilya Lyubushkin fits in all this. Does he stay with Riley? Does he potentially get a crack to playing with Mark Giordano? Or does he go and play with Jake Muzzin? Imagine a pairing of Jake Muzzin and Ilya Lyubushkin.
It's not fun to play against.
That would not be fun to play against. And I'm wondering if that's something the Leafs consider down the road. We'll get a better sense of that when Jake Muzzin is back. Likely won't be for at least a week or two. He's starting to escape, but he's, considering he's in a no contact jersey, what I think suggests that he's not close at this point. So why don't we give out 3 stars for the game? Obviously, similar to how you see it every game night. You don't necessarily have to give it to the best player on the stat sheet. You could even give it to somebody who's did something that kind of caught you off guard. Mike throws a wrench and everything when he goes oh, I'll give it to the third line. I'm like, well, that's not a player.
That's 3 players.
That's his sneaky way of giving more than one player into the star conversation.
That's fine. Give everyone their flowers. It's fine with me.
Exactly. So I'll go first. I'll give you a moment to make sure that
Please.
You've got your 3 stars locked down. I'm gonna give my 3rd star to Pierre Engvall, mainly just because he took a not so great penalty that led to a power play goal for the Devils, but he made up for it with the shorthanded beauty they had late in the game that pretty much won the game. It was the game winner. So that's the Pierre Engvall I think we need to see more of. The guy that's going to be he can finish. It just feels like sometimes he overthinks it. This one, he had a little more time. The patience he showed was really good. And that's a tough, good, you get a scoring chance like that, you got to convert, and he did. So I'm going to give him that all deserving 3rd star for that reason. Who would you give your 3rd star to?
I think I'm going to go with Ilya Mikheyev. I think we might have ours. I think we're in the same ballpark of who we're going to pick here, because I was going to go Engvall as my 3rd, but now I'm thinking, I'll change it up a little bit. Mikheyev, I mean, that play on the penalty kill was fantastic. Just him, from what we saw of him in the KHL, we knew he had that breakaway speed. He just hasn't always been able to show it. And I think just being able to fight off PK Subban coming out the back check and then getting it to his backhand around the goaltender and scoring, that's a beautiful shorthanded goal. And just the play, obviously, I believe it was Marner made that play to get the puck to him, but just the effort to get up the ice that quick was really impressive for me.
Yeah, I had Mikheyev as my 2nd star for that reason. I thought that goal was tremendous. It gave, the Leafs felt like they were kind of just getting by. They needed something to spark things, and he kind of got everything going with that goal. It was a beautiful goal. Not an easy goal either. He's generally coming on the other side of that play. He's not usually going on the backhand there. So nice to see him put that one in the net. I felt like he had a good game. I was looking who else could I give it to? There were you see here. The one thing I found interesting was you look at the number of hits some of these guys had. Engvall had a couple, which I am very surprised. I'm usually one saying that Engvall shies away from contract. Lyubushkin once again had 4. Colin Blackwell had 4 in this game. He didn't play as
He
much,
was finishing his checks.
but he was finishing checks in this one. But out of all the players that played, Mikheyev was deserving to get himself on the 3 stars label for tonight.
I'm going to flip it on you. I'm going to give Pierre Engvall my 2nd star. I obviously shorthanded goal, game-winning goal. I think that's the one that separates it for me, and just probably one of the nicest moves I've ever seen him make. Dave, you know from just us chatting behind the scenes, like I have a soft spot for Pierre Engvall. I think he's one of the smoothest skaters for his size that I've ever seen, and he makes tough plays that get him in a little bit of hot water with Sheldon Keefe, but then you make plays like that and you realize why he sticks around in the Leafs lineup, because he can have that offensive spark. The weirdest thing for me on that goal was seeing a 2-on-1 or, like a partial 2-on-1 and going, they're shorthanded. Why the hell is William Nylander on the ice? That was the first thing I thought. And then I saw Pierre Engvall absolutely do the defender like that and cut to the middle.
Yeah. And obviously some people were wondering that. And that's, well, when you're killing a 4-minute penalty,
you got to throw some extra bodies.
You're going to have to throw some guys out there that, you're not going to be able to run the penalty killers as much, especially in that part of the game.
Throw out everyone's favorite Swede. We'll be fine.
Exactly. I was even trying to think who was the one that got that penalty late in the game.
It was a 4-minute. I can't think off the top of my head who it was, though.
Yeah, I'm blank. Oh, sorry. It was Mikheyev. That's what it was. Yeah.
Okay.
I said it was one of their penalty killers that got sent off, and that's part of the reason why Engvall was getting out there. So it's good to see that you can. I feel like when you look at the Leafs special teams and the fact that they constantly use their speed as a way to defend that penalty kill and get those odd man rushes, Engvall should be able to benefit from that if he can prove to be defensively reliable when he doesn't have the puck on the penalty kill. Yeah. So Engvall, a deserving star, as I had him as my 3rd. You had him as your 2nd. Are we going to be going the same for our 1st star here?
Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
You go first. I'll let you go first.
I was talking about giving guys flowers, so we're going to give Petr Mrazek his flowers tonight. Okay. I mean, the other guy I was thinking of was Austin Matthews, because he was just putting the puck on guys' sticks left and right. Petr Mrazek is the first time in a little while that he's gone under 3 or 4 goals a game. He made the saves he needed to. I don't think you can really put either of the goals that were scored on him tonight on him. The first one's a Lyubushkin, tries to get down to block the backdoor pass, goes on out the shin pad. Second one's an absolute circus in the crease, and like you said earlier, Justin Hall probably needs to clean that up a little bit better, but it was just an absolute mess. So, he made the saves that he needed to make, and he got the dub, so I'm going to give him my 1st star and show him a little bit of love here.
All right, yeah, I think Mrazek deserves a bit of a shout-out there. When you've gone as bad as Mrazek has gone, being put on waivers, bouncing back and picking up the W deserves some recognition. I got to go with our boy Mitch, though. I mean, yeah. He had the most ice time in this game. More than any defenseman, too. That's very rare for a forward to get that much. I mean, obviously, with the penalty kill and how much he was on there, it really helps.
Mike Babcock's in the fetal position right now hearing that.
Yeah. But I felt that, that top line once again still was pretty dangerous, had most of the chances. And it was nice to see Matthews and Marner connect on that goal. And I just think we're getting close to Mitch Marner being a 30-goal scorer. Like, I don't think anybody would have expected Mitch Marner to be in the conversation of 30 goals, considering his career high was 26 in an 82-game season. He surpassed that in 54 games. Yeah. So I think if you
could be talking 35, honestly. Like, if he keeps going at the rate he is, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So I think Mitch definitely is. Proving some people wrong. Others are going to need a little more convincing when the chips are all down on the table. Speaking of chips down on the table, and really, we don't want to look too far ahead into the playoffs, but we can't help but not look at what's going on in the Atlantic Division right now and how this Leafs victory kind of throws some things into a loop. So we're going to talk about that on the other side of this break. We're going to hear from a couple of show sponsors. on the audio side of things. So when we come back, we're gonna kind of go through the arms race of the Atlantic Division, which has been kind of one of the hottest topics to talk about in the last few days. Welcome back to the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti here with my guest co-host Austin Owens. Leafs picking up the 3-2 victory over the New Jersey Devils, and with that victory, they have done something I did not expect to see, and kind of was thrown out of a loop when I saw that. Look, the Toronto Maple Leafs are second in the Atlantic Division, behind the Florida Panthers by 5 points. They trail the Panthers by 5 points. They haven't played them yet. Next week they play them.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a very interesting scenario. Now, look, yes, they have played one more game than both the Lightning and the Panthers, but they also have a few games against these teams late in the season. I think this is a real opportunity right now for this Leafs team. Look, I don't. Florida can easily go on a run and keep their first place setting, but 5 points isn't
Not much.
is not much. And it's funny. Somebody somebody called me and just like, "You see that the Leafs passed Tampa?" And I said, "Yeah, this is weird." And he's like, "Man, has Tampa been bad if that were to happen?" Well, yeah, they lost against the Rangers, back-to-back losses against the Rangers and the Hurricanes. They lost to the Oilers this past weekend. No, the Leafs, for as bad as things had been going, I say that very loosely because
Weren't we imploding a week ago?
yeah, considering people were saying that the Leafs were not legitimate contenders. I heard this all during the NHL trade deadline.
It's hilarious because we do our complaining obviously behind the scenes and stuff we see, and then you look at the standings and it's like you would think this team is in Montreal's position right now, not with 85 points with 19 games to play.
Yeah, like we have 19 games left in the season. It's really anybody's race at this point. And the interesting thing here is that tomorrow night, so Thursday night, Boston and Tampa play each other. And Boston is 1 point behind Tampa. So I actually think if Boston were to win, they would leapfrog not only Tampa, but I think they leapfrog the Leafs because, or no, if they beat the Lightning in regulation, I think they beat Leafs and Bruins would be tied on ROW. So I actually think that the Leafs would have the edge because they have an extra game in hand. But to think that Tampa might drop out of the top three, kind of interesting. And then if you're the Metro Division, you're just like, "Oi, oh crap!"
Yeah, that's not ideal. But I mean, just who cares about the Metro? It's more of a us problem. The world revolves around the Leafs, so let's focus on the Leafs. Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
But no, I mean, I think it's quite interesting because not too long ago, the thought process is maybe the Leafs have better luck going through the Metro. But maybe the best thing for the Leafs is don't even have to see Tampa in the first two rounds.
Because it's funny, right? It's just like
it really is, because that's been the whole thing about why the Leafs' chances don't look that good this year is because they got to go through Tampa and Florida. But now if you're seeing the playoff race and how it's shaking out, we don't know how. I'm seriously doubting we have any idea how this is going to end.
That's why last season was such a big deal, right? It looked like the Leafs with the Canadian division were such a shoe-in for the conference final. And then everyone was sort of on the wavelength of, well, we have this 1 year to go for it. And then we're back to having to deal with Boston and Tampa. And now Florida's a bit of a wagon. And now they've bought in at the deadline. So now we have to deal with them. And it's just like last year felt like the year. And I don't want to relive last year, but that's just a little, throwback to terrible times. I don't want to play Boston just for reasons. I don't need to go through another 7-game series of playing that team. But Tampa and Florida are equally undesirable when it comes to playing them. So there's no easy route when it comes to the Atlantic Division. You're going to have to play somebody good. The only workaround is if, like you said, you go to the Metro, but then you still have to, deal with the Penguins who just bought in, went and got Rickard Rakell. You have to deal with those teams as well. There are no pushovers when it comes to the playoffs. Rangers, Hurricanes are a tough team. The Leafs get shelled every time they play the Hurricanes. Like, there's no easy outs in the playoffs. I think that's so, especially if Tampa's in the wild card. Like you said, that's nightmare fuel for the Metro. If one of them ends up with them in the first round, that's not fun at all.
Yeah, and you look at the next 3 games coming up for the Leafs. You got the Canadians, who have not been an easy team to play against, despite what the record suggests. Maybe it's the fact that Cole Caulfield is being used properly by his head coach. I'm going to go on a limb and say that. But then after the Habs, you got Florida and Boston as your next 2 games. You're going to find out very quickly where the Leafs stack up in this. And an interesting thing I'm wondering here is, so first question is, do we see Jack Campbell come back soon? Because he was skating. I think throwing him up on the road in Montreal might be a little tough.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sewer move there. You don't really do. I don't think you should do that to your goalie coming off injury because, like you said, Montreal's not an easy team to play against, and playing in the Bell Center is never an easy time.
So the question here is: do you hold them off until Florida and Boston, or do you wait until you play Winnipeg the following week?
Oh,
there's really no game
to
get Jack Campbell back in here, but maybe that's what he needs.
Yeah, I think he needs one of those tough competition games just to get him locked in, and who knows what kind of form he's in. If it's the Jack Campbell of last year makes an appearance, or if it's the Jack Campbell we've seen post All-Star break, but something's got to give with him, and we've talked about that. You've talked about that last little bit. It's such a tough position, right? I think you go into that Montreal game, you see what happens, and then you monitor from there because, Boston and Florida are 2 teams that you need points against. So if you feel like Jack Campbell gives you the best chance in those games, then yeah, you roll with him. But if you feel like he's not quite ready and he's just going to re-aggravate that rib injury, then you got to roll the dice with Mrazek and Shalgren then at that point.
Yeah, and I'm gonna assume Mrazek gets the next start against Montreal, just because they threw him on waivers. It seemed like
fast forward to Shalgren starting.
I think this was more so the Leafs trying to give Mrazek that final wake up call. Like this was his last shot.
Yep,
this is gonna have to be. I think maybe he's focused. We'll see if he can now handle a bit of a tougher role. It's not ideal, but it's what the Leafs are dealing with right now. Final note here. I don't know if you caught wind of Elliot Friedman's 32 thoughts that just popped out not too long ago. He said that 4 or 5 teams placed a waiver claim on Hari Shatari or Shatari. I don't know. I don't really. The good thing is we don't have to worry about how to say his name after today. But
yeah, because he's not on the team anymore, so we're all set.
I find that quite interesting that 4 or 5 teams, like we were mad about Arizona making that claim. I mean, they have every right to. But 4
Arizona
or 5
wasn't
teams,
the only ones. Yeah, and you have a goalie like that has a pretty good frame. He's had time, playing professional hockey. I think he posted a over 920 save percentage in the KHL this season in over 35 games. And then he had something like a 962 in the playoffs. And it wasn't for, a CSKA or an SKA. This was for one of the teams that isn't expected to contend every year. So he wasn't doing this on one of the stacked teams in the K. He was doing this against one of those middle ground teams, which is really impressive. So it is what it is. I mean, Kyle Dubas mentioned it in his press conference following the trade deadline that the Leafs have lost, I think it was 11 players since 2018 to waivers.
Maybe even more than that. Like
it sucks for the Leafs, but when you have that many good players, it's bound to happen. The easy way to put it is don't put good players on waivers, but you don't really have a choice when you're in the Leafs situation. So, that's the game you play when you put guys on waivers, and Dubas and them know that there's a 50-50. You're either keeping them or you're losing them.
Yeah, and Elliot Friedman, I think, also said in that same vein was maybe the smarter play would have been to give him a 2-year deal. That makes teams kind of think about whether to claim or not. I don't know, but it's over. We're done with it. Let's close that chapter. Let's just hope the Leafs at this rate of the season, the roster is what it is. They got the victory. They move on to Montreal. Let's just say, Mike and I will break down this game in the next podcast, but I think it's safe to say This is a pretty important game. You do not want the Leafs to have to hear about losing to the Montreal Canadiens again after what happened the other day.
I'm excited to see Harry Satteri's thank you video when he comes to Toronto for the first time. That's all I have to say.
Well, fortunately, and we'll see. We won't have to worry about that for now, but maybe next year, if he sticks around the NHL, we'll have to keep an eye on that. Thank you again, Austin, for filling in for Mike tonight. I'm sure he is celebrating his victory. Fedora looked pretty spiffy on him, I will say.
The fedora was dialed tonight. So absolutely fantastic. He's definitely just mowing on a charcuterie board right now.
You have to.
I couldn't be happier for him. Yeah,
you have to pick up. You have to after you pick up the victory. So
you think Kitchener's a big charcuterie board town?
Apparently, they had one ready for them when they got there, so they knew they were coming. So, well, I'm sure Mike enjoyed that, and I'm sure we will discuss that when he joins on the podcast tomorrow. So that will do us. That will do it for us today. The words. I'd like to thank you for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasting platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Make sure you follow myself at @Morassutti on Twitter, and you can find Austin at _Austin Owens. If you really like lacrosse, Austin is very much big into lacrosse, so that's another way you can get some great content from Austin there. Make sure you follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow, and I always have to remember, subscribe to us on YouTube. And if you didn't catch us on Twitter, I've almost forgot this announcement. We were recently named Pod of the Week on the Locked On Network, which huge network considering all the different leagues that we cover, college, professional. So obviously that's wouldn't happen without our great listeners, both on YouTube and on audio. So big thank you there, and we will continue this journey together, good or bad. Until next time, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.